Jesus said unto them, Verily I say unto you, before Abraham was, I am. Now remember, when Moses asked the Lord, he said, what is your name, that I can tell my people who you are? And the Lord said, I am that I am. Okay. He is I am. Okay. He is the word I am. Okay. Which is one word, soy in Spanish. And, but he said it using the word instead of just the initials or whatever, however way that the Jews circumvented saying the name I am, because to say I am publicly like that would have been blasphemy according to their law. Okay. But Jesus is using that word that was given to Moses, I am, in exactly the same way that it was given to Moses, and therefore they took up stones to cast at him, but Jesus hid himself out of the temple, going through the midst of them, and so passed by. Okay, so they couldn't hurt him, but they wanted to. They wanted to stone him for saying that he was the great I am. Okay. Okay. So, continuing into chapter 9. And so there's a man that was born blind. All right. And so, among the Jews, and I talked about this in the book of Matthew, sin and sickness, diseases and afflictions many times have much to do with each other. That's not to say that if you have an illness or a disease or an affliction, that it is directly the result of sin. But for sure, if you have some kind of sin, you are going to develop some kind of disease or affliction because of your sin. Okay? I read a book one time that was talking about psychosomatic illnesses, and it's been proven that about 80% or better of illnesses are psychosomatic. A person has bad feelings, and the bad feelings, which usually come from guilt, result in some kind of illness or disease or affliction. Okay? So that's definitely true. And so the theory was that if, like this man was born blind, well, is it possible to sin before you're born? You know, he was born blind, or was it something that, so sin that his parents committed, that the affliction fell upon the child because of the parents? Okay, and you see, because because they had the idea that sin results in affliction, but affliction does not necessarily all come from sin. Okay, like I have a recent example of a young woman who has sickle cell anemia, right? Well, at some point in time early in her life, somebody blamed it on God. God did this to you. And so she's hated God for years because God made her sick. Well, no, it didn't come from God. It didn't come from her sinning. It didn't necessarily come from her parents sinning. It was a genetic problem, things that do happen. But what Jesus goes on and says, neither hath this man sinned nor his parents, but that the works of God should be made manifest in him. You see, the thing about diseases and affliction is there is nothing physical that cannot be fixed by the power of God. You see, and like I was telling this young woman, I said, it's not God's fault that you are the way you are. But before you were born, you agreed to the circumstances of what was going to happen, knowing that you would meet somebody in your life who would have the power to fix what is wrong with you. And I said, and that's what we're here for. We're here to fix the problem that was created, who knows when. I mean, it's a genetic disease, so somewhere back in the history, somebody sinned to develop the genetic mutation that created the disease. And but it wasn't God's fault. You see, it wasn't her fault, it wasn't her parents' fault. It was the fault of somebody long before, and ultimately the fault's with the devil, right? And we're there to fix that which is broken. Okay. I must work the works of him that sent me while it is day. The night comes when no man can work. Okay, and when you're out of the world, you can't do it. When Jesus left, I mean, he's talking about when he leaves, he's going to leave people behind to continue his work. All right. As long as I am in the world, I am the light of the world. When he said thus, he spat on the ground and made clay of spittle, and he anointed the eyes of the blind man with the clay. And they told him to go wash his eyes, and he went, and he came back being able to see. So, here's a great miracle, because they knew this guy from the time he was a baby, and he had been blind, and suddenly he's able to see, and they were amazed by it. How did this happen to you? Well, Jesus did it for me. Anointed my eyes with mud, and I went and washed them off, and now I can see. And so, but it was, now, if it had happened during the middle of the week, there probably would not have been any question. It would have been all right. But Jesus didn't do it on the weekend. He didn't, or during the week. He did it on the Sabbath day. Okay, so they took the blind man to the Pharisees. What do we do with this guy? I mean, he's been healed on the Sabbath day, and that's supposed to be against the law or whatever. And so then they questioned the blind guy, and they said, how is it that you were blind, now you can see? Were you really blind? He said, well, go ask my parents. They'll tell you that I've always been blind. So he went and asked the parents, and so he tells them that it was Jesus that did it, and he said he's a great prophet. And he said, how can he be a prophet if he's healing on the Sabbath, which is against the law? And but then on the other hand, how can a sinner do miracles? See, so on the one hand, he can't be a prophet because he's doing it on the Sabbath, but if he's a sinner, he can't do miracles. So I mean, you can see where the confusion comes. So they looked at the blind man and said, well, what is he? And he says, he's a prophet. So they called the parents, and how is it that he can see? And they say, we know this our son, and that he was born blind, but by what means he now sees, we don't know. You're going to have to talk to him. He's old enough; he can speak for himself. And these words spake his parents because they feared the Jews. They didn't want to commit one way or another that they were believing in Jesus, or that they were even grateful for Jesus for healing their son. So they just put it back on the son. And so, when they talked to the blind man again, he could not have done it because he was a sinner. Give God the praise for being able to see, but don't say anything about this guy doing it because he was a sinner. And he answered, said, whether he be a sinner or not, I don't know. One thing I know, and that whereas I was blind, now I see. And then they said unto him again, what did he to thee? How opened he your eyes? And he said, look, I've already told you. It's not, my story isn't going to change just because you keep asking me the same question. And so he said, if I tell you again, are you going to become his disciple? And then they got mad at him. We know that God spake unto Moses, as for this fellow, we know not from whence he is. The man answered and said unto them, why, herein is a marvelous thing.